Yo, welcome to the Father Built podcast, where we want to see fathers built up in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. This podcast is all about equipping fathers with the tools to build their house of legacy. My name is Bobby Peacock, and I am the host of this podcast. And so, this is the very first episode. Last week we had the intro episode, and this week we have officially episode numero uno, episode one. So here we are. I want to recap kind of like what this podcast is about. Obviously, it's about building up fathers in healthiness and holiness and happiness. I got that order all mixed up, but like really, it's actually in a very specific order, which is holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And the reason why it's actually in that order is because as fathers, we should strive to be holy. We should strive to be set apart. We should strive to be different. So that's the first thing, is that like everything just starts from that holiness, or that our spiritual being, our spiritual life, uh and our spiritual lifestyle. And after that is healthiness. And when I'm talking about healthiness, a lot of times we really think of like physical health, but no, I'm talking like spiritual health. I'm talking about physical health, yes, mental health, emotional health, financial health, um, relational health. I'm talking about all these areas of that we should be healthy in. And even business health. You can put, we got entrepreneurs out there, me included, like even business health, like and family health. There's so many aspects of health um that we can't just say physical, emotional kind of, or and mental health. It's encompassing all areas of us as like fathers and men. And then lastly is happiness. Like happiness is a big thing. It's like, yes, sometimes like I rather be healthy than happy, but like happiness and joy, it also is an important part. And I feel like sometimes as fathers, we kind of lose sight of that, because we're so focused on building that we forget to enjoy the process, enjoy our family in that time, enjoy everything that life brings at us. And so happiness is also important. And so, we're going to have guests on here that literally I have two guests planned, hopefully. That they're literally, we're just gonna sit on here and we're just gonna crack a whole bunch of jokes and just just literally laugh our butts off, because we need that joy, we need that comedy, we need that happiness in our life. And um so with this podcast, like it's really, I'm really aiming it towards, the fathers out there, not only the fathers but like the young man, the fathers, the young fathers, and the single fathers. And part of this too is like, this is what some people like to call legacy content. And what legacy content is basically content that's going to go past us. It's going to go beyond us, and and push us to be better. And so that's kind of like what legacy content is. And so some of y'all may be asking, like, first of all, who is Bobby Peacock? Second of all, what gives him the authority to even speak on fatherhood, or even have this podcast, or even host this podcast? Let's be real. I'm gonna be 100% real and raw and transparent with y'all. I have absolutely no authority to host this podcast. Listen, I will say this, that I'm a single father of one, and I have seen a lot of different father figures in my life. But honestly, like when it comes to authority, of seeing what happened with my dad, and going back to, like, I met my dad in 2020, and it was August of 2020, and we got on a phone call. It was a late phone call, and I got to talk to my biological father. Not everybody has the opportunity to do that. And when I did that, it was like a piece of me that was like, that I was longing for, like, kind of like it was a puzzle piece that just came in, and just like God just placed it right there. And it gave me so much joy and happiness, and I felt a new sense of belonging. Well, fast forward to 2024, or actually 2023. uh my father had a heart attack the day after Christmas, and he didn't have the right tools to complete his house of legacy. And it was hard, traveling back and forth to Michigan and South Dakota to see him, and watch him go through what he went through. And January 4th, he took his last breath, and I felt in that moment that, like, God was saying, like, you need to build your house of legacy. You need to build for your son. You need to build for the future, and you need to stop getting distracted by all these earthly things, these earthly possessions, these earthly wants, and you just need to move forward in a manner that is holy and pleasing to me. And so that kind of birthed this podcast, and like sitting and wanting to sit down and interview some of my homies and my friends, and some other dope fathers out there that are leaving or living a life of legacy, and leading a life of legacy as well for their kids. And so for me, that's kind of like really what this is about, is saying, like, my father, he didn't have the tools, he didn't have the things that he needed to be equipped with um, by the end of his life. And so if I can help other fathers with that, uh, that will be absolutely awesome. And so that's kind of what this podcast is about, is like giving fathers the tools, equipping them with the tools. Like, maybe it's finances, or maybe it's a will and trust, or maybe it's insurance, or life insurance, or different projects that fathers like to work on, like handyman stuff, whatever. Like, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about the man things, but then we're also gonna talk about, like, maybe fashion, because I like fashion, and I think fathers should have a little bit of swag to them. And fathers, I mean, we should be fashionable. I mean, maybe just a little bit, but um and so I'm digressing. But I also want to kind of tell you guys um, a little bit of my story, and what it was like for me to grow up, and kind of jump into that. And so here's a little bit of my story. So picture this. There's a single mom in Columbus, Ohio. She's already had three kids. One of those kids she already placed for adoption. And so she finds herself in a relationship, and she ends up getting pregnant. And the relationship is starting to go a little bit south. It's starting to not look good. And so the last thing that she tells her boyfriend at the time is that she's going to have an abortion. And so the boyfriend decides, the relationship's already going south, and I'm just going to go back home to Michigan. So the single mom in Columbus, Ohio, she thinks about it. and she thinks about it and she chooses life. She contacts the same adoption agency and the same other mom who adopted her baby girl before this child. And she places this other child for adoption. The same mom from South Dakota adopts this kid as well. So moved to this single mom in South Dakota. She kind of dealt with some abusive things um, from her past, and she kind of put that on her kids. And so basically, the kids were locked in the bedroom at night, beat with pots and pans. The house was always a mess. She was a hoarder. It just didn't look good. And the kids would go to school dirty. They would go to school with bruises, and finally the state came into play, and um, 10 different foster homes, 3 different children facilities, and then 2 failed adoptions. That was the lifestyle that these kids were living. And so one of those kids was me. uh, I was the last kid that my biological mom placed for adoption. She had 2 others after me. And so, growing up in an environment where I was not set up for success right off the bat, and it was tough. It was hard, having to deal with being locked in the bedroom at night and being beat with pots and pans, and like when we would swear and stuff or say something bad or mouth off. Back in the day, you'd get soap. We got like half of the bottle of Dawn soap, and it seemed like it was like took 2 days to wash that out of our mouth, kind of thing. And yeah, it was tough. It was tough. And like growing up with not having a consistent father figure as well was really really hard as well, because it was one of those things where I would always cling to different men in my life. I mean, I praise God that I had different men in my life show up at the right time. But it was tough, uh not having a consistent father figure. And so 10 different foster homes, 3 different children facilities. I had another chance to get adopted, but I was an angry kid. I was so angry, and I wasn't connecting with the family. And so basically, it was another failed adoption. And so, fast forward to the second day of 6th grade, I moved back to South Dakota to a family with loving arms open wide, accepting me like as I am and who I am. And basically, that was like my last foster home. It had its ups and downs. I um didn't always connect with them on a level. Part of it was because they were Caucasian or white, Dutch, and I was, a young Black American, or some people like to say African American or Black person. I don't know. Gotta make sure that I hit all of them. I prefer Black American, but that's just me. But I digress. Moving on. Um, and so, yeah, it was like one of those things where uh, I didn't always connect with them, but there was always grace, there was always love, uh, and I had an opportunity to grow in a healthy environment. And let me tell you, there were some times where I was a punk kid and things were rough, but I had a loving home that loved me no matter what, that loved me through the hard things, that loved me through the good things. And so, cool thing is, I actually live a block away from my foster parents, or 2 blocks away from them right now, at the time of this recording. So yeah, so grew up in that healthy environment from 6th grade, where you're trying to middle school, where you're trying to find yourself, to high school, where you're trying to establish yourself. And then had the opportunity to check out some colleges, and I ended up, going to college for 1 year and coming back and getting a church internship, and started adulting when I wasn't even really ready for it. And yeah, and started getting tattoos. It was great. Like, life was good. Um, and Yeah, when I was 23, I met my biological mom. That was really cool. Got to meet her, talk to my brothers and sisters that that she kept. And then after that, like, I got married. Um, but it wasn't necessarily the most healthiest way to get married. Um, and I'm not all about like speaking like negative of my ex-wife. She's a good person. You know, we had a son out of our marriage, and um beautiful, beautiful son, and I love him so much. Like, he's my pride, my joy, my everything. But I will tell you that in an unhealthy marriage, in an unhealthy environment, you are most likely going to become unhealthy. In a healthy environment, you are going to become healthy, because all you see is healthiness. And so our marriage was just not healthy. Simple put. You take a single guy at 23, um, going on 24, who knows nothing about fatherhood, to putting him in an environment where, he's now married, and he has a wife and 3 kids. Uh, that was tough. It was really, really tough to establish myself as a father. And I didn't know much, and I didn't have much community behind me either in that environment. And so it was just not healthy. We'll put it at that. And now, as I'm 31, and I, you know, um, gave birth to my son when I was like, what, 26, something like that. Um, and I would say I'm a better father outside of the marriage than I was in. And man, I tell you what, being a father is like, y'all know, being a father is something else. I remember, and I'll always hold this above of my ex-wife. I got to hold my son before she did. So, um, but man, when I held him for the first time, like, everything in the world didn't matter. Nothing in the world mattered except for me and him in that moment. And I remember, like, all these answers were coming to me. I'm like, God, I don't know how I'm going to do this before he was born. But like, when he was born, like, and I got to hold him, like, all the answers kind of just went popping off, like, this then and there. And I remember having a conversation with God, and I'm like, man, God, like, now your love for me really makes sense. Like, I get just a little glimpse, a little taste of your love for me, because this is my flesh. This is me. This is my mini me. This is half of my genes, like, right here in this moment. And I just remember having that conversation, and just saying, like, God, like, your love for me makes a little bit more sense. And so um that was probably like one of the coolest father moments for me. And things didn't work out in the marriage, and so here I am as a single father who has my son 50% of the time. And when I have him, I try to be 100% invested, and I love him. Like, we are active like Legos, and my son's like getting into soccer right now, and so trying to steward that well, and steward being a father well. And there's a lot of areas that, like, I am working on, like, just to be honest, like, I'm not the best with my finances, and so trying to figure out how to better that, so that my son can um you know, that he can have something for him when he gets older, whether it's like a college fund or you know, I don't know what that's all gonna look like, but yeah. And it's been a year, you know, watching my father go through what he went through. Going back to that, it just realized that, like, my father, he didn't have a will, he didn't have a trust, he didn't have finances in order, um, and it was a mess. And so for me, it's one of those things where it's like I want to set that up for success for my son and make sure that, man, I got a will, man, I got a trust, I got people that are going to take care of my son if something would happen to me. And yeah, and it's scary to think about. And so, like, I have friends that are pushing me, like, hey, you need to get a house. And so I'm striving to figure out how I can get a house, how I can um be better, how I can get my debt in order, my finances in order, my credit score up, and all these things. And I feel like I'm starting from ground zero, just to be honest. Actually, ground negative zero, just to be honest. But I know that if I keep my mind on the grind and my eyes to the goal, that I can get it. That I got this. That, like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're gonna make it, and my son's gonna be proud, and I'm gonna be able to build that legacy for my son and his kids when he gets older. And so, yeah, you know, part of this podcast too is just like building a catalog for my son, um, to watch, to look at, to learn. And so that's kind of like that legacy content, that legacy mindset of like building this catalog so that, like, other kids, when they can come back and watch their fathers on this podcast, and they can understand, like, well, man, my father was wise, my father had wisdom, my father had a lot to offer. And so we're not perfect fathers, but, you know, we strive for our best. And so, anyways, I'm digressing here, but thank you guys so much for tuning in to the first episode of the Father Built podcast. I probably rambled a little bit, but it's okay. And remember, this is a podcast where we want to build fathers up in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And we want to equip fathers with the tools for them to build their house of legacy. And so, like always, guys, remember, peace, love, blessings. We out.